he couldn't
Hello
speak it, but he
everyone,
could understand
welcome
it.
to my channel.
Whereas I was more the other way around. I actually picked it up like parrot.
I'm Paige, 24 years old, and right now I'm standing in the family company's break room, watching my brother Derek practice his future CEO speech in the mirror, while our other brother Marcus times him on his phone. Remember to mention the quarterly projections, Marcus says, not looking up. Dad says investors love numbers. I take a sip of my coffee, the same coffee I've been making for everyone else here for the past 3 years. Nobody knows I'm related to these people, and honestly, that's exactly how I like it. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. See, while Derek's been rehearsing speeches and Marcus has been decorating his corner office, I've been doing something a little different. I've been actually learning this business. It started when I was 19, fresh out of high school. Zero college plans, and Grandpa William, the founder and CEO, offered me an internship. Not because I was his granddaughter, but because he said I had good instincts. My parents thought it was charity work to keep me busy. My first day, I walked into the reception desk job expecting to answer phones and file papers. Instead, I met Margaret, our 60-year-old receptionist who'd been there since the company started. She took one look at me and said, "Honey, if you're going to work here, you're going to learn everything." And I mean everything. Margaret didn't just teach me how to transfer calls. She explained who was calling and why it mattered. When Mr. Thompson from our biggest client called complaining about delivery delays, she showed me how to track the shipping manifest and identify the real problem. When our accounting department couldn't balance the monthly reports, she walked me through reading financial statements until the numbers made sense. Most people here look at departments like separate kingdoms, she told me one afternoon. But a business is like a body. Everything connects. You can't fix a problem in one area without understanding how it affects the others. By month 3, I wasn't just answering phones. I was solving problems before they reached management. The financial department was constantly behind on invoicing because their system was outdated. I spent my lunch breaks learning their software and created templates that cut processing time in half. The operations manager started asking me to sit in on vendor meetings because I'd memorized our entire supplier database and could spot pricing inconsistencies immediately. And my family? They had no idea. To them, I was still little Paige playing office. My mom would ask how my receptionist job was going, and I'd just smile and say, "Fine." Derek would joke about me making copies, and I'd laugh along, because honestly, their ignorance was my advantage. While Derek spent his days in meetings discussing strategic vision and Marcus networked at country club lunches, I was down in the warehouse learning why shipments got delayed. I was in the legal department understanding contract negotiations. I was with our IT team fixing the database issues that had been slowing down sales for months. The truth was, I loved it. Not the position or the title, but the puzzle of it all. Every department was a piece, and I was slowly figuring out how they all fit together. But there was something else nobody knew about. Something that would change everything. Every Friday at 5:30 after the offices cleared out, Grandpa William would find me. "Walk with me, Paige," he'd say, and we'd tour the building together, him asking questions about what I'd learned that week. "What did you notice in accounting?" he'd ask. "They're losing money on the Henderson contract," I'd reply. "The shipping costs weren't factored into the original bid." He'd nod thoughtfully. "How would you fix it?" And I'd tell him, not because I wanted to impress him, but because I genuinely cared about solving the problem. These conversations had been going on for 3 years now. 3 years of learning, observing, and quietly becoming someone I didn't even recognize. Someone who understood this business better than the people with their names on the door. But that was about to change. Today was different. Today, Derek's speech wasn't just practice for some random board meeting. Today was the announcement of Grandpa's retirement, and according to my parents, Derek and Marcus were about to be handed the keys to the kingdom. As I watched my brothers in that break room, rehearsing their acceptance speeches for an inheritance they'd never actually earned, I couldn't help but smile. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I arrived at the office at 7, an hour before everyone else, which was normal for me. Margaret had taught me that the quiet hours were when you could really understand how the business operated. I settled at my desk and pulled up the shipping reports. We'd been having issues with our West Coast clients, and I had a theory about what was causing it. 2 hours later, I'd confirmed it. Our distribution center was using an outdated routing system that was adding 3 days to delivery times. "You're here early." I looked up to see Marcus walking past, designer suit already perfectly pressed at 8 in the morning. He paused at my desk, glancing at my computer screen with mild curiosity. "Just catching up on some filing," I said, minimizing the spreadsheet. "Right. He checked his Rolex. He checked his, well, big day today. You excited to see how real leadership works? I smiled sweetly. Can't wait. The thing about my brothers is that they genuinely believe they've been working hard. Derek spends most of his time in strategic planning meetings, which, from what I can tell, involve a lot of talking about synergy and market positioning. Marcus handles client relations, which mostly means taking people to expensive lunches and golf games. They're not incompetent, exactly. They're just distant from the actual work. Take last month's crisis with our biggest client, Morrison Industries. They were threatening to cancel their annual contract because of quality control issues. Derek scheduled a meeting with their executives. Marcus arranged a dinner at the city's most exclusive restaurant. Together, they spent weeks crafting the perfect presentation about our commitment to excellence. Meanwhile, I spent my lunch breaks in the production facility, talking to line supervisors about what was actually going wrong. Turns out we'd switched to a cheaper supplier for one component, and it was causing random failures. The fix wasn't a fancy presentation. It was switching back to our original supplier and implementing a new quality check. I wrote up the solution and left it on Derek's desk with a note saying, "Overheard some workers discussing this." He presented it at the Morrison meeting and saved the contract. Everyone praised his keen insight into operational details. I watched him get that praise and felt nothing. No anger, no resentment, just satisfaction that the problem got solved. That's the difference between my brothers and me. They want credit. I want results. Paige, honey, can you help me with something? I turned to see Jennifer from accounting approaching my desk with a stack of papers. She'd been one of the first people to really talk to me like a person instead of just the intern. "What's up?" I asked. "These quarterly reports aren't balancing, and I've been staring at them for 2 days. I know you're good with numbers." I loved that she said it like that. Not, "You're just the receptionist," but, "You're good with numbers," because I was. Really good. 15 minutes later, I found the discrepancy. A decimal point error in the third quarter that had been throwing everything off. Jennifer hugged me. "You're amazing," she said. "I don't know how you see these things. Pattern recognition," I told her. "Numbers tell stories. You just have to know how to listen." As I handed the corrected reports back to her, I noticed something. Jennifer wasn't the only person who'd started coming to me with problems. Over the past year, it had become a regular thing. The IT guy asked my opinion on software upgrades. The logistics coordinator ran scheduling changes by me. The legal assistant showed me contracts when she wasn't sure about the language. I wasn't their supervisor. I wasn't even officially part of their departments. But somehow, I'd become the person people trusted with problems. And the really interesting part? None of them knew I was family. At lunch, I decided to test something. Instead of eating at my desk like usual, I went to the employee break room. The conversation stopped when I walked in, then resumed after a few polite nods. "Did you hear about the Morrison contract?" one of the production supervisors was saying. "Apparently Derek figured out the quality issue all by himself." "Really?" another voice said skeptically. "Because I could have sworn I saw Paige down here asking questions about those components a few weeks ago." My heart stopped. "Who's Paige?" someone asked. "The receptionist. Nice girl. Actually listens when you talk to her, unlike most of management." I quietly made my sandwich and left. But as I walked back to my desk, something clicked into place. The employees knew. Maybe they didn't know I was related to the owners, but they'd noticed that problems got solved after I asked questions. They'd connected the dots between my curiosity and Derek's sudden insights. For 3 years, I'd thought I was invisible. Turns out, I was only invisible to my family. That afternoon, Grandpa called me into his office. Our weekly Friday meeting had been moved up because of the retirement announcement. "Close the door, Paige." I sat across from his massive oak desk, the same one he'd used to build this company from nothing 40 years ago. "Are you ready for today?" he asked. "Ready for what?" "Exactly?" He studied my face for a long moment. "Your brothers seem to think they know what's coming." "Derek's been practicing his acceptance speech," I said. "I know, I heard him." Grandpa's eyes twinkled. "What do you think about that?" It was a loaded question. We both knew it. "I think Derek would be a fine ceremonial leader," I said carefully. "He's good with people, charismatic, looks the part. And Marcus? Marcus understands the financial side well enough. He'd probably delegate most of the actual work anyway." Grandpa nodded slowly. "And what about you, Paige? What about me? What would you do if you were running this company?" I'd been asked this question in various forms for 3 years. And for 3 years, I'd given honest, thoughtful answers. Not because I wanted the job, but because I genuinely cared about making things better. First thing, fix the West Coast shipping delays. The routing system is costing us time and money. Second, Implement the quality control changes I suggested for the Morrison contract, but company-wide, not just for one client. Third, upgrade the accounting software. Jennifer's been working with a system from 2015, and it's slowing down everything. He leaned back in his chair. You've given this some thought. You asked. I've been asking these questions for 3 years, Paige. And for 3 years, you've had answers. Real answers. Not theories or strategies, but actual solutions. I shrugged. I like solving problems. Your parents think you lack ambition. Maybe I do. Or maybe I just have different priorities. He smiled at that. In 2 hours, this company is going to have a new leader, and that person is going to face challenges your brothers can't even imagine. Something in his tone made my stomach flutter. Grandpa, the announcement starts at 4, he said, standing up. You should probably be there. Of course I'll be there. Good. He walked around the desk and put his hand on my shoulder. Because today, Paige, everything changes. The auditorium was buzzing with energy by 3:30. Employees, investors, board members, and family all gathering for what everyone assumed would be a standard succession announcement. I found a seat in the back, as usual, where I could observe without being noticed. My parents sat in the front row, practically glowing with pride. Mom kept turning around to wave at various important-looking people, making sure they saw her. Dad was checking his phone constantly, probably coordinating with whoever was handling the press release. Derek and Marcus sat on either side of them, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Derek kept adjusting his tie. Marcus was staring at the podium with an expression I couldn't quite read. Ladies and gentlemen, a voice said over the speakers, please welcome William Montgomery, founder and CEO of Montgomery Industries. The applause was thunderous. Grandpa had been leading this company for 40 years, and he was genuinely beloved, not just by family, but by employees who'd watched him build something meaningful. He stepped up to the microphone and waited for the noise to die down. Thank you all for being here today, he began. 40 years ago, I started this company with a simple philosophy: treat people well, solve real problems, and success will follow. Today, I'm here to talk about the future of that philosophy. Standard opening. Nothing surprising yet. Building a company isn't about finding the right strategies or having the perfect plan. It's about understanding what matters and having the courage to act on that understanding. I noticed he wasn't reading from notes. This speech was coming from somewhere deeper. Over the years, I've watched many talented people come through these doors. Some had impressive credentials, some had natural charisma, some had ambitious plans for growth and expansion. His eyes swept the room, landing briefly on Derek and Marcus. But the most valuable person in any organization isn't necessarily the loudest or the most visible. Sometimes it's the person who notices what everyone else misses. The person who cares more about solutions than recognition. The person who understands that real leadership happens in the quiet moments when nobody's watching. Mom was nodding along enthusiastically, probably thinking he was building up to announcing Derek as the new CEO. I could see her mentally rehearsing her proud mother speech. 3 years ago, Grandpa continued, someone started working in this building. Someone who could have coasted on their connections, but chose instead to learn every aspect of our business. Someone who spent time in every department, not to network or climb ladders, but to understand how we actually operate. The audience was completely silent now. This wasn't going where anyone expected. This person fixed problems before they became crises, improved systems without asking for credit, built relationships with employees based on respect, not authority. I felt my heart start racing. This person never asked for a promotion, never demanded recognition, never played political games or maneuvered for position. They simply did the work that needed to be done. Derek was frowning now. This didn't sound like a speech about him. Which is why, Grandpa said, his voice growing stronger, I'm proud to announce that the new CEO of Montgomery Industries will be my granddaughter, Paige Montgomery. The silence was deafening. Then the whispers started. Who? Which granddaughter? I thought Derek. I sat frozen in my chair, staring at Grandpa as he continued speaking. For those who don't know, Paige has been working here for 3 years under her first name only. She's the person who solved the Morrison Industries quality crisis. She's the reason our shipping delays decreased by 40% last quarter. She's behind the efficiency improvements that saved us nearly $2 million this year. The whispers were getting louder. Paige Montgomery isn't just my choice because she's family. She's my choice because she's proven, through her actions, that she understands what leadership really means. Not managing people, but serving them. Not commanding respect, but earning it. Mom's face had gone completely white. Dad was staring at Grandpa like he'd lost his mind. Derek looked like he'd been slapped. But Marcus? Marcus was looking right at me, and slowly he started to smile. The transition will begin immediately, Grandpa said. I have complete confidence that this company will thrive under Paige's leadership. She has my full support, and I hope she'll have yours as well. He gestured toward the back of the room. Paige, would you like to say a few words? Every head in the auditorium turned to look at me. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling like they belonged to someone else. The walk to the podium felt like it took forever, and no time at all. As I passed my parents' row, I could feel their shock radiating like heat. Derek wouldn't meet my eyes, but Marcus reached out and squeezed my hand as I walked by. I reached the podium and looked out at the crowd. Employees I'd worked beside for 3 years, many of whom were just now realizing who I actually was. Investors who'd probably never heard my name before today. Board members who were clearly trying to process what had just happened. And my family sitting in the front row looking like their world had just been turned upside down, because it had. Thank you, Grandpa, I said into the microphone. And thank you all for being here today. My voice was steady, which surprised me. I know this announcement comes as a shock to many of you. It comes as a shock to me too. But I want you to know that I don't take this responsibility lightly. I looked directly at Derek and Marcus. This company succeeds because of all of you. Because of the people who show up every day and do the work that matters. Because of the relationships we've built with our clients and partners. Because of the values my grandfather instilled here 40 years ago. I paused, letting that sink in. I've spent the last 3 years learning from all of you. Learning what works, what doesn't, and what we can do better. That's not going to change. I may have a new title, but I'm still going to be the person who asks questions, who listens to your ideas, and who believes that the best solutions come from understanding problems, not ignoring them. The applause started slowly, then built. Employees who'd worked with me were clapping enthusiastically. Others were still processing, but they were clapping too. As the noise died down, I looked at my parents again. I know some of you expected this announcement to go differently. I said, change is never easy, but I hope we can all work together to build something even better than what we have now. More applause. Thank you again for your time and your trust. I'm looking forward to getting to work. I stepped away from the podium and walked back toward my seat, but Grandpa intercepted me and pulled me into a hug. I'm proud of you, he whispered in my ear. Thank you for believing in me, I whispered back. As we separated, I caught sight of my parents' faces again. Mom looked like she was about to cry. Dad was staring at me like I was a stranger. And Derek was standing up, adjusting his tie one more time, and walking toward the exit without a word. The real test was just beginning. The reception after the announcement was interesting. Half the room wanted to congratulate me. The other half wanted to figure out what the hell had just happened. I found myself surrounded by employees I'd worked with, all of them suddenly understanding why their problems had gotten solved so quickly over the past few years. I knew it, Jennifer from accounting said, grinning widely. I knew you weren't just a receptionist. You knew too much. The Morrison contract fix, said Paul from logistics. That was you, wasn't it? Not Derek. I smiled but didn't answer directly. That was a team effort. Derek deserves credit for presenting the solution. But Paul shook his head. No, I remember now. You came down to the production floor asking questions about quality control. A week later, Derek announces he's figured out the problem. He laughed. You've been covering for them this whole time. Before I could respond, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Marcus standing behind me, still in his expensive suit but somehow looking younger than he had that morning. Can I talk to you for a minute? He asked. I excused myself from the group and followed him to a quieter corner of the room. How long have you known? He asked. Known what? Come on, Paige. How long have you known this was coming? I studied his face. You really want to know? He nodded. I didn't know until today, but I've suspected for a few months that Grandpa was evaluating us differently than Mom and Dad realized. Marcus was quiet for a moment. The weekly meetings. You knew about those? I suspected. You always seemed to know things about the business that didn't come from answering phones. He ran his hand through his hair. I should have paid more attention. Marcus. No, let me finish. He looked around the room, then back at me. I've been coasting. We both know it. Dad and Mom had this plan for how things would go, and I just went along with it. But you've actually been working. I didn't know what to say to that. Are you angry with me? He asked. The question surprised me. Why would I be angry? Because I've been taking credit for things you accomplished. Because I've been treating you like hired help instead of my sister. Because I never bothered to learn what you were actually doing here. I considered that for a moment. I'm not angry, I said finally, but I am disappointed. He winced. Fair enough. Where's Derek? He left. Said he needed to process. Marcus shook his head. He's not taking this well. And you? He was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the reception still in full swing. Honestly, I'm relieved. That surprised me. Marcus, I never wanted this job, Paige. Not really. I wanted the idea of it, the status, the respect, the way people would look at me. But the actual work, the responsibility, the idea of people depending on me to make the right decisions? He shook his head. It terrified me. You could have learned. The way I did. Could I? Really? He looked at me seriously. Be honest. If I had started asking questions, spending time with employees, trying to understand the business, would I have been as good at it as you? I started to give him a diplomatic answer, then stopped. I don't know, but you never tried to find out. Exactly. He smiled, but it was sad. You know what I realized today? I've been playing a role for 3 years, acting like the future executive, saying the right things, looking the part, but you've been actually living it. Before I could respond, our parents approached. Mom looked like she'd been crying. Dad looked furious. We need to talk, Dad said. All of us. Now. Marcus and I exchanged glances. The conference room is probably empty, I suggested. No, Dad said sharply. Not here, at home. This is a family matter. Actually, I said calmly, this is a business matter. And I'm the CEO now. So if you want to discuss company business, we discuss it here. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's eyes filled with tears again. Paige, honey, we had no idea. That's the problem, I said gently. You had no idea what I was doing, what I was capable of, or what I wanted. You just assumed. We assumed you weren't interested in leadership, Dad said defensively. You never said anything about wanting to run the company. When would I have said something? During the dinners where you and Mom planned Derek's future? During the family meetings where you discussed Marcus's development track? When exactly was I supposed to express interest in something you'd already decided didn't involve me? Dad opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. We were trying to protect you, Mom said weakly. The business world is so competitive, so harsh. We didn't want you to have to deal with that pressure. So instead, you decided Derek should deal with it, even though he clearly didn't want it either. I wanted it. Derek's voice came from behind us. He'd come back, apparently. We all turned to look at him. His tie was loose now, and his hair was messed up. I wanted the job, he said again. I wanted the respect, the authority, the success. I didn't want to earn it. The honesty of that statement hung in the air. I've been watching you for 3 years, he said to me. Watching you learn, watching you solve problems, watching you actually care about making things better. And I kept telling myself it didn't matter, because leadership was about more than just understanding the business. He laughed bitterly. But it's not, is it? That's exactly what leadership is about. Understanding the people, understanding the problems, understanding what needs to be done, and having the courage to do it. Derek, I'm not angry with you, he said quickly. I'm angry with myself, because deep down, I knew this was coming. I knew Grandpa was testing all of us, and I knew I was failing. He looked around at our parents, at Marcus, at me. The difference is, you weren't trying to pass a test. You were just trying to do good work. And for the first time since I'd known him, my older brother looked at me with something that might have been respect. The family dinner that night was the most awkward meal of my life. We sat around the same dining room table where we'd eaten thousands of meals together. But everything felt different. Every comment had weight. Every silence had meaning. Mom had cooked my favorite meal, pot roast with potatoes and green beans, which felt like both an apology and an attempt to return to normal. But normal was gone forever. So, Dad said finally, cutting into his meat with more force than necessary, I suppose we need to discuss logistics. What kind of logistics? I asked. Your transition into the role. Training? Preparation? You'll need time to… Dad. I set down my fork. I've been preparing for 3 years. Answering phones isn't the same as running a company, Paige. The comment stung, but I kept my voice level. You're right. Answering phones isn't the same as running a company, but learning every department, understanding our client relationships, identifying operational inefficiencies, and implementing solutions that save millions of dollars, that's exactly the same as running a company. Derek snorted. She's got you there, Dad. Dad shot him a look. You're finding this amusing? Actually, yeah, I kind of am. Derek leaned back in his chair. Do you know what I've learned about our business in the past 3 years? I can recite our quarterly projections from memory. I can explain our market positioning strategy. I can give you a PowerPoint presentation on synergistic opportunities. He paused. But I couldn't tell you why our shipping costs went up last quarter, or which suppliers are causing quality issues, or why employee turnover in the logistics department is twice what it is everywhere else. Those are operational details, Mom said. Management is about bigger picture thinking. Is it? Derek asked. Because Paige's operational details have been saving this company money and solving problems while I've been thinking big picture thoughts that don't seem to relate to anything real. Marcus had been quiet through most of this exchange, but now he looked up. She knew about the Henderson contract problem 6 months ago. Everyone turned to look at him. The shipping cost miscalculation that almost cost us the renewal. Paige identified it in January. I saw her talking to the accounting team about it, but we didn't fix it until Derek discovered it in May. Why didn't she say anything? Mom asked. Marcus and Derek both looked at me. Because, I said quietly, every time I brought up a concern or suggested an improvement, you either dismissed it as me, not understanding the complexities, or credited someone else with the insight. So I stopped bringing things to you. I started fixing them myself. The silence that followed was crushing. How many problems have you fixed that we don't know about? Dad asked finally. Dad? No, I'm serious. How many? I thought about it. The Morrison quality issue, the Henderson contract, the West Coast shipping delays, the accounting software inefficiency, the IT security vulnerability that would have cost us our insurance coverage, the supplier billing error that was costing us $30,000 a month, Okay, Dad said, holding up his hand. Okay, I get it. No, I don't think you do. I was surprised by the steel in my own voice. Those weren't little problems that I happened to notice. Those were major issues that could have seriously damaged this company. Issues that I identified, researched, and solved while you were planning Derek's ascension to a job he didn't want and wasn't prepared for. We were trying to do what was best for everyone, Mom said, tears starting again. Were you? Or were you trying to do what looked right to everyone else? That hit home. I could see it in their faces. Mrs. Patterson from the country club, I continued. Mr. Williams from Dad's golf foursome. The board members who've known Derek since he was 10. You were worried about what they would think if the youngest child, the daughter who didn't go to business school, ended up running the family company. Image matters in business, Dad said defensively. Does it? Or does competence matter? Derek laughed again, but there was no humor in it. She's right, Dad. All those people you're worried about impressing, they care about results. And Paige has been delivering results while I've been delivering presentations. This isn't just about you kids, Dad said, his voice rising. This company is our family's legacy. Your grandfather built something important here, and we need to make sure it continues to thrive. Then why would you hand it over to someone who's never actually done the work? I asked. The question hung there. Because, Mom said softly, we thought the work would come naturally once Derek had the position. And because, Dad added reluctantly, we thought leadership was about making decisions, not understanding details. But decisions are only as good as your understanding of the situation, I said. And you can't understand the situation if you've never been in the trenches. Marcus pushed his food around on his plate. So what happens now? Now, I said, we figure out how to work together. If you want to. What do you mean? Mom asked. I mean, Derek and Marcus still have roles in this company. Important roles. But those roles need to be based on your actual skills and interests, not on some predetermined succession plan. I looked at Derek. You're good with people. Charismatic. Clients trust you. That's valuable. Then at Marcus. You understand the financial side better than most people realize. And you have connections that could help us grow. But, Derek asked, but neither of you should be making operational decisions about things you don't understand. And I shouldn't be giving investor presentations or schmoozing at charity galas. We all have strengths. We should use them. Dad was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. When did you get so wise? He asked. Probably around the time you stopped paying attention to what I was thinking. It wasn't meant to be cruel, but the truth often cuts deep. Mom reached across the table and took my hand. We're proud of you, sweetheart. We should have said that earlier. We should have seen what you were accomplishing. Thank you. But this is going to take some adjustment, Dad warned. For all of us. I know. And there will be people who question your qualifications, your experience, your age. Dad, I interrupted. I've been questioned and underestimated my entire life by clients who thought I was too young to understand their problems, by suppliers who tried to inflate prices because they assumed I didn't know better, by our own employees who thought I was just the receptionist. I smiled. The difference is, now I have the title to go with the competence, and anyone who wants to question my qualifications is welcome to review the past 3 years of improved performance metrics. Derek raised his wine glass. To my little sister, who apparently isn't so little anymore. Marcus raised his glass too. To competence over appearances. Mom and Dad exchanged a look, then raised their glasses as well. To family, Dad said. However unexpected the leadership might be. We drank to that, but as I sat there, surrounded by my family, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenges were just beginning, because announcing that I was the new CEO was one thing. Actually becoming the leader this company needed, that was going to be something else entirely. My first official day as CEO started at 6 a.m. with a crisis. The night security guard called my personal phone, the emergency number that previously would have gone to Grandpa, to tell me that our largest production facility had an equipment failure that would shut down manufacturing for at least 24 hours. By the time I arrived at the office, word had spread. Employees were gathering in small groups, whispering about production delays and missed deadlines. The overnight shift supervisor looked like he hadn't slept. "How bad is it?" I asked him directly. "Bad," he said. "The main assembly line is down. We've got 3 major client orders that won't ship on time, and repairs could take 2 days minimum. What about the backup systems?" He looked surprised. "You know about the backup systems?" "I know about everything." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my notes. "The secondary assembly line in Building B. It's older and slower, but it should be able to handle priority orders if we redistribute the workflow. That would require completely reorganizing the production schedule," he said. "Then let's reorganize it." For the next 2 hours, I worked with the production team to redirect orders, contact clients, and implement a temporary manufacturing plan. It wasn't perfect, but it would minimize delays and keep our most important customers satisfied. By 8 a.m., when the office officially opened, we had a solution in place. Derek arrived around 8:30, looking polished and professional in another expensive suit. He found me in the production facility still wearing the safety gear I'd put on to inspect the broken equipment. "Mom called," he said. "She was worried about how your first day was going." "It's going fine," I said, pulling off my safety glasses. "Crisis management is part of the job." "You handled this yourself?" "I handled it with the team. That's how problems get solved." He was quiet for a moment, watching employees move with purpose around us. "I would have called Grandpa," he admitted. "I know. Or scheduled a meeting to discuss options." "I know. You just fixed it." That's what needed to be done. We walked back toward the main building together. "Paige," Derek said as we reached the executive floor, "I owe you an apology." "You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do." He stopped walking and faced me. "I've spent 3 years treating you like you were playing dress-up while I was doing real work. But the truth is, I've been the one playing dress-up." The admission hung between us. "Derek, let me finish." He ran his hand through his hair. "I wanted this job because I thought it would make me important. But you wanted to do this job because you thought it was important. There's a big difference." "You could still learn," I said. "If you wanted to." "Could I? Really?" He gave me a rueful smile. "Be honest. Do you think I have what it takes to be good at this?" I studied his face. "I think you have what it takes to be good at something. Maybe just not this. What should I be good at? What do you enjoy doing? Not what you think you should enjoy, but what actually interests you?" He thought about that for a long moment. "I like working with people," he said finally. "Not managing them, but connecting with them, understanding what they need, building relationships. That's valuable in business. Just maybe not in the CEO role." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying we should figure out where your talents would be most useful. Client relations, maybe? Business development? Partnership management?" His face lit up slightly. "You'd want me to stay?" "Derek, you're my brother. And you're not incompetent, you're just misplaced. Of course I want you to stay." The relief in his expression was obvious. "What about Marcus?" he asked. "Marcus and I talked yesterday. He's interested in focusing on strategic planning and investor relations, things that use his financial background but don't require operational oversight." "And you think that will work? All of us working together without the hierarchy Dad and Mom had planned?" "I think it will work better than the hierarchy Dad and Mom had planned," I said, "because it's based on what we're actually good at instead of what looks right on paper." Derek was quiet as we walked to the elevator. "You know what's funny?" he said as we waited for the doors to open. "What?" "I spent 3 years being jealous of your relationship with Grandpa. Those weekly meetings, the way he talked to you, the way he listened to your ideas." "You were jealous?" "Of course I was. He was grooming you, and I couldn't figure out why. I thought maybe you were his favorite because you were the youngest, or because you reminded him of Grandma, or because I was doing the work?" Derek laughed. "Yeah, that possibility never occurred to me." The elevator arrived and we stepped in. "Derek," I said as the doors closed, "I need you to know something." "What?" "Those meetings with Grandpa? They weren't about planning a coup or undermining you. They were about learning. Every week he would ask me what I'd discovered, what problems I'd identified, what solutions I was considering. It was like school, but for how to run a business. Why didn't he offer the same thing to Marcus and me? Did you ever ask him questions about the business? Real questions. Not about strategy or vision, but about how things actually worked? Derek was quiet for a moment. No, he said finally. I was too busy trying to prove I already knew everything. That's the difference. I asked questions because I wanted to understand. You avoided questions because you thought you were supposed to already understand. The elevator opened on our floor. It's not too late, I added as we stepped out. If you want to start asking questions now, would you teach me? The way Grandpa taught you? The question surprised me. Of course, I said. But it won't be easy. It means admitting you don't know things. It means spending time with people you've been treating as subordinates. It means getting your hands dirty. I can do that. Can you really? He considered that seriously. I don't know, but I'd like to try. As we reached my office, Grandpa's old office, which still felt surreal, Derek paused. Paige? Yeah? Thank you. For what? For not making this a power trip. For still wanting us to be a family. For giving me a chance to figure out who I actually am instead of who I thought I was supposed to be. I smiled. That's what family does. Is it? Because I'm not sure our family has been very good at that lately. Then maybe it's time we got better at it. He nodded and headed toward his office. As I watched him go, I realized something had shifted. Not just in the company hierarchy, but in our relationship. For the first time in years, Derek and I were talking to each other like equals, like siblings, like people who might actually work well together. It was a promising start, but I knew the real test would come when the novelty wore off and the daily grind of running a business together began. Still, for now, it felt like progress. And progress was all I needed. 3 weeks later, everything changed again. The invitation arrived on expensive cardstock with gold embossing. You are cordially invited to celebrate the retirement of William Montgomery and the future of Montgomery Industries. Black tie required. The city's most exclusive venue. 500 guests. I stared at the invitation sitting on my desk, next to the quarterly reports that showed our best performance in company history. Looks fancy, Marcus said, appearing in my doorway with his own invitation. It is fancy, I replied. Mom's been planning this for 6 months, before Grandpa made his announcement about you. Exactly. I leaned back in my chair, which means this party was designed to celebrate Derek's ascension to power. Marcus came in and sat down. So what happens now? Now we find out how committed Mom and Dad are to their new reality. The truth was, I'd been dreading this party since the moment the invitations went out. In the 3 weeks since becoming CEO, I'd been too busy actually running the company to think about public relations and image management. But this party was all about image. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Sweetheart, can you come by the house tonight? We need to discuss party logistics. Duty calls, I told Marcus, showing him the text. Good luck, he said. You're going to need it. That evening, I found myself back in the family dining room, but this time the atmosphere was different. Mom had spread party planning materials across the table like a military operation. Seating charts, catering menus, timeline schedules. There you are, she said when I walked in, her voice artificially bright. We have so much to discuss. Dad was sitting at the head of the table, looking uncomfortable. Derek was notably absent. Where's Derek? I asked. He's processing, Dad said carefully. The party situation is a bit complicated for him. I sat down and looked at the materials spread across the table. How complicated? Mom cleared her throat. Well, the invitations went out months ago, before we knew about the change in circumstances. So the wording is a bit... She handed me a copy of the invitation. I read it again, this time noticing what I'd missed before. Join us as we celebrate William Montgomery's remarkable career and welcome the next generation of leadership to Montgomery Industries. The next generation, I repeated. It was meant to refer to Derek and Marcus, Mom said quickly. But now it could refer to you too, of course. Could it? Dad shifted in his seat. Paige, we need to talk about expectations for this party. What kind of expectations? Well, Mom said, consulting her notes, we have investors coming. Board members. Important clients. People who've known this family for decades. And they're expecting to see a certain dynamic. I felt that familiar flutter in my stomach. What kind of dynamic? Traditional family structure, Dad said bluntly. The son's taking over from the father, the daughter in a supporting role. The room went very quiet. Supporting role, I repeated. Just for the party, Mom said quickly. Just to avoid confusion. What kind of supporting role? Mom consulted her notes again, not meeting my eyes. Well, Derek and Marcus will give speeches about the company's future. They'll sit at the head table with your father and grandfather. They'll participate in the ceremonial aspects of the evening. And me? You'll be helping coordinate things, making sure everything runs smoothly. You've always been so good at that. The audacity was breathtaking. Let me make sure I understand, I said slowly. You want me to play hostess at a party celebrating my promotion to CEO, while my brothers accept credit for achievements they didn't earn, in front of people who now work for me? It's not about credit, Dad said defensively. It's about maintaining relationships, about presenting a unified family front, a front that erases my actual role in this company. Just for one evening, Mom said, just until people adjust to the changes. I sat there for a moment, processing the request. 3 weeks ago, I might have agreed. I might have convinced myself it was for the good of the company, or that it didn't matter what people thought as long as I knew the truth. But 3 weeks of actually being CEO had changed something in me. No, I said simply. No? Mom repeated. No. I won't pretend to be something I'm not to make other people comfortable with reality. Paige, be reasonable, Dad said. These relationships matter. Image matters. You're right. Image does matter. And the image you're suggesting is that this company is still run by the boys' club that's been making the wrong decisions for years. That's not what we're suggesting, Mom protested. Isn't it? You want me to serve drinks while Derek gives speeches about a future he won't be controlling? You want me to coordinate details while Marcus accepts congratulations for successes he didn't achieve? How is that not exactly what you're suggesting? The silence stretched uncomfortably. What do you want us to do? Dad asked finally. I want you to introduce me as the CEO. I want Derek and Marcus to be introduced in their actual roles. I want the speeches and presentations to reflect reality instead of what you wish reality was. People will be surprised, Mom said weakly. People will adjust, the same way they adjust to every other change in business. Some of them won't like it, Dad warned. Then they're welcome to take their business elsewhere. But I won't run a company while pretending someone else is in charge. Mom looked like she might cry. This isn't how I imagined this party going. I know, I said gently. But maybe it's time to start imagining things differently. We sat in silence for several minutes before Dad spoke up. You're not going to compromise on this, are you? Would you, if you were in my position? He considered that for a long moment. No, he said finally. No, I probably wouldn't. Mom gathered up her planning materials with shaky hands. I suppose I need to revise some things. Mom, I said softly, this doesn't have to be painful. It can be a celebration of what I've actually accomplished instead of a performance of what you thought would happen. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. I really am. I don't know how to show it anymore. Start with the truth, I suggested. That's always a good place to begin. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments below. The day of the party arrived with all the subtlety of a natural disaster. I spent the morning at the office, handling last-minute crises and trying to pretend I wasn't nervous about the evening ahead. The venue had been transformed into something out of a magazine, elegant lighting, perfectly arranged flowers, and enough champagne to float a small yacht. By 4 o'clock, I couldn't concentrate on work anymore. I went home to get ready, choosing a midnight blue dress that struck the right balance between professional and elegant. As I applied my makeup, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was different from the one who'd started this job 3 weeks ago. More confident, more certain, more visible. My phone rang. Marcus. How are you holding up? He asked. Fine. Why wouldn't I be fine? Because in 3 hours, you're going to be in a room full of people who've known you as William's quiet granddaughter for your entire life, and now they have to think of you as their CEO. When you put it like that, it sounds almost fun. Marcus laughed. You know what I realized today? What? I've never seen you nervous about anything. Not work, not family drama, not even today. How do you do that? Who says I'm not nervous? Are you? I considered the question seriously. I'm not nervous about my ability to do the job. I'm nervous about other people's ability to accept that I'm doing it. That's their problem, not yours. Is it? Because if they can't accept it, it becomes a business problem. And business problems are my responsibility. Fair point. He paused. Derek's not coming. What? He called an hour ago. Said he can't handle being at a party where he has to watch other people congratulate you for the job he thought was his. I felt a pang of something. Disappointment, maybe, or sadness. Is he okay? He will be, but he's still processing. Give him time. After we hung up, I sat on my bed for a few minutes, thinking about Derek. Despite everything, I'd wanted him there tonight. Not to upstage him or prove a point, but because he was my brother. Because this was supposed to be a family celebration. But maybe some things couldn't be forced. The party venue was already crowded when I arrived. I'd deliberately come 30 minutes after the official start time, hoping to avoid the awkward early moments when everyone was still figuring out how to act. The strategy worked perfectly. By the time I walked through the doors, people were deep in conversations, drinks were flowing, and the social dynamics had settled into familiar patterns. What I hadn't expected was how those patterns would shift when people noticed me. Paige! Mrs. Henderson, one of our oldest clients, approached with a bright smile. Congratulations, dear. What a wonderful surprise. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I have to admit, when I first heard the news, I was a bit, well, surprised might be an understatement. Here we go, I thought. But then I remembered our conversation last year about the shipping delays and how you handled that situation so smoothly. I should have realized then that you were more than just a pretty face behind the reception desk. I appreciate that. Your grandfather made the right choice. Sometimes the best leaders come from unexpected places. She moved on to talk to someone else, leaving me feeling cautiously optimistic. That optimism lasted about 5 minutes. Well, a voice behind me said. If it isn't the surprise CEO. I turned to see Robert Crawford, one of our biggest investors, holding a martini and wearing the kind of smile that wasn't really a smile. Mr. Crawford, thank you for coming. Wouldn't miss it. Though I have to say, your grandfather's announcement caught everyone off guard. Change often does. Indeed. He sipped his drink, studying me like I was a problem he needed to solve. You know, I've been doing business with this company for 15 years. In all that time, I don't think I've had a single conversation with you about strategy, vision, or long-term planning. That's because I was learning the business, not planning it. Another sip. And now you feel ready to plan it? The question was loaded with skepticism. Mr. Crawford, our quarterly performance has improved 23% since I took over. Our client satisfaction scores are at an all-time high. Our operational efficiency has increased across every department. Does that answer your question about my readiness? He blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct response. Well, he said after a moment, I suppose results do speak for themselves. They do indeed. As he walked away, I noticed other people watching our exchange. Some looked impressed. Others looked concerned. All of them were definitely paying attention. I moved through the party for the next hour, having similar conversations. Some people were genuinely supportive. Others were politely skeptical. A few were openly dismissive until I mentioned specific improvements I'd made that had affected their business relationships with us. But the most interesting part was watching how my family navigated the evening. Mom and Dad moved through the crowd like seasoned politicians, smoothly redirecting conversations away from uncomfortable topics and towards safe ground. Marcus worked his network with practiced ease, talking about financial projections and market opportunities. And then there was the moment when everything changed. I was talking to a group of board members about our expansion plans when I heard my mother's voice over the sound system. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. The crowd gradually quieted and turned toward the small stage at the front of the room. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate my father-in-law's incredible career and the bright future of Montgomery Industries. Standard opening. Nothing surprising. 40 years ago, William Montgomery started this company with a vision of excellence, integrity, and family values. Tonight, we're here to celebrate the continuation of that vision under new leadership. I felt my stomach start to clench. This transition represents not just a change in management, but a passing of the torch to the next generation, a generation that understands both the legacy they're inheriting and the responsibility that comes with it. She paused, looking out over the crowd. I'm proud to say that Montgomery Industries will continue to thrive under the guidance of people who have been raised with our values, educated in our traditions, and prepared for this moment their entire lives. Oh no, tonight begins a new era for our company, an era led by the true successors to William Montgomery's vision, the people who were born to carry this legacy forward. She gestured toward Marcus, who was standing near the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the next generation of Montgomery leadership. The applause was enthusiastic. Marcus smiled and waved, looking slightly confused about why he was being spotlighted. But Mom wasn't finished. These young leaders have spent years preparing for this responsibility. They understand that success isn't just about profit, but about people, about community, about maintaining the standards that have made Montgomery Industries the respected company it is today. I stood frozen in the middle of the crowd, watching my mother systematically erase my existence from the narrative of my own success. Today begins the era of the true successors. More applause, more smiles, more people turning to congratulate Marcus on his promotion while I stood there invisible. That's when I felt a hand on my shoulder. Grandpa was standing behind me, and he did not look happy. Time to fix this, he said quietly. And for the first time in weeks, I felt truly ready for what came next. Grandpa didn't wait for Mom's speech to end. He walked straight to the stage, his presence commanding enough that people automatically moved aside. Mom saw him coming and faltered mid-sentence. "Thank you, Patricia," he said, gently but firmly taking the microphone from her hands. That was interesting. The room buzzed with confused energy. This wasn't part of the planned program. "Good evening, everyone. I apologize for the interruption, but it seems there's been some confusion about tonight's purpose." Mom stepped back, her face flushing red. 3 weeks ago, I announced that my granddaughter Paige would be taking over as CEO of Montgomery Industries. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of that transition. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People started looking around, searching for me. "However," Grandpa continued, his voice carrying easily over the crowd, "it appears some family members are having difficulty accepting this reality." The murmurs got louder. This was not the polite, sanitized family celebration people had expected. So let me be absolutely clear about something. Paige Montgomery is the CEO of this company. Not because she's my granddaughter, but because she's the most qualified person for the job. Period. I felt hundreds of eyes searching for me in the crowd. Over the past 3 years, while others were preparing for leadership through meetings and presentations, Paige was earning it through results. She identified and solved problems that saved this company millions of dollars. She built relationships with employees based on competence, not authority. She learned every aspect of our business from the ground up. His voice was getting stronger, more forceful. The quarterly improvements you've all benefited from? That was Paige's work. The efficiency increases that have made your partnerships with us more profitable? Paige's innovations? The quality improvements that have enhanced our reputation? Paige's solutions. The room was completely silent now. And tonight, instead of celebrating those accomplishments, some members of my family have chosen to pretend they never happened. He looked directly at Mom and Dad. "That ends now." Grandpa gestured toward where I was standing. "Paige, would you please join me?" The crowd parted as I walked toward the stage. My heart pounding, but my steps steady. As I climbed the few stairs to the platform, I could feel the weight of every person's attention. Grandpa handed me the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded, "I'm Paige Montgomery, and I am the CEO of Montgomery Industries." A few people clapped uncertainly. I know some of you are surprised. 3 weeks ago, many of you knew me as the receptionist or as William's quiet granddaughter. You probably never imagined that the woman answering your phone calls would someday be running the company. I paused, looking out over the crowd. But here's what you might not know. Every time you called with a problem, I didn't just take a message. I researched your issue. I worked with our teams to find solutions. I made sure your concerns were addressed quickly and effectively. Robert Crawford was staring at me with a completely different expression than he'd had an hour ago. When your shipments were delayed, I tracked down the bottlenecks and fixed them. When your invoices were incorrect, I identified the source of the errors and prevented them from happening again. When your contracts needed revisions, I worked with our legal team to make sure your needs were met. The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning. For 3 years, I've been solving your problems and improving your experiences with Montgomery Industries. The only difference now is that I have the title to match the responsibilities I was already handling. More confident clapping this time. Some of you might be wondering about my qualifications, my experience, my ability to lead a company this size. I smiled, and for the first time all evening, it felt genuine. I invite you to judge my qualifications by our results. Since I became CEO 3 weeks ago, we've exceeded our quarterly targets, improved client satisfaction scores, and implemented cost-saving measures that have increased profitability without sacrificing quality. The clapping was getting stronger. But more than that, I invite you to judge my leadership by the people who work with me every day, by the employees who trust me with their concerns, by the managers who collaborate with me on solutions, by the teams who have seen their ideas implemented and their contributions valued. I looked directly at my parents. Leadership isn't about titles or bloodlines or meeting expectations. It's about earning trust, delivering results, and making the difficult decisions that move a company forward. The applause was enthusiastic now. I didn't ask for this job because I wanted power or prestige. I earned this job because I wanted to make Montgomery Industries the best version of itself. And that's exactly what I intend to do. As I handed the microphone back to Grandpa, the applause became something more. It wasn't just politeness anymore. It was genuine respect. "Thank you," Grandpa said into the microphone. "Now, let's celebrate what Montgomery Industries has actually accomplished and where we're actually going." As I walked down from the stage, people approached me with a completely different energy than before. The conversations weren't about surprise or skepticism anymore. They were about business opportunities, future plans, and genuine congratulations. Mrs. Henderson was beaming when she reached me. That was exactly what needed to be said. "Dear," exactly what needed to be said. Robert Crawford approached more cautiously. Ms. Montgomery, I owe you an apology, and possibly a conversation about expanding our partnership. I'd be happy to discuss that, I told him. But the most important moment came when I found my parents standing by the bar, looking shell-shocked. Mom, Dad, they turned toward me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Mom started, then stopped. That was what you should have said, Dad finished quietly. Instead of trying to erase you from your own success story. Mom's eyes filled with tears. I thought I was protecting you. From what? From failure. From judgment. From people who might not take you seriously. But instead, you were protecting them from having to take me seriously. The truth of that statement hung between us. We made a mistake, Dad said. A big one. Yes, you did. Can you forgive us? I looked at my parents, really looked at them, and saw something I hadn't seen before. Not malice or deliberate cruelty, but fear. Fear that their daughter was entering a world they thought would hurt her. Fear that she would fail and they would be responsible. It didn't excuse what they'd done, but it explained it. I can forgive you, I said. But things are going to be different going forward. Different how? Different in that you're going to treat me like the CEO I am, not like the daughter you're worried about. Different in that you're going to support my decisions instead of trying to manage other people's reactions to them. Different in that you're going to trust me to handle my own professional relationships. They exchanged a look. Can you do that? I asked. We can try, Mom said. We will do that, Dad corrected. As the party continued around us, I felt something shift fundamentally in our family dynamic. The old patterns of protection and limitation were finally breaking down, replaced by something that might actually resemble respect. It had taken a public confrontation to get there, but we'd gotten there, and honestly, sometimes that's what it takes. The Monday after the party, everything felt different. I arrived at the office to find a stack of new business proposals on my desk, all from contacts I'd met at the retirement celebration. Apparently, my impromptu speech had done more than just clarify my role. It had generated actual opportunities. Morning, boss, Jennifer from accounting said as she dropped off the weekly reports. She was grinning. How does it feel to be officially official now? Exhausting, I said honestly, but good. The whole office is talking about Saturday night. Margaret said it was about time someone put your family straight about who actually runs things around here. I laughed. Margaret said that? Margaret's been defending you for 3 years. She knew exactly what you were doing, even when your parents didn't. That afternoon, I had a meeting with the senior management team, the same people who'd been reporting to me unofficially for months, but now with everything out in the open. So, said Tom from operations, settling into his chair, what's the plan now that we don't have to pretend Derek's making the decisions? Actually, I said, pulling out my notes, Derek might be more involved than you think. That got everyone's attention. In what capacity? Asked Sarah from HR. Client relations and business development. He's genuinely good with people and he understands the relationship side of business better than any of us. Can he handle the technical aspects? Tom asked skeptically. He doesn't need to handle the technical aspects. That's what we're here for. He needs to maintain relationships and identify opportunities. Let us worry about implementation. It was a radical shift from the traditional family hierarchy, but it made sense. Derek's strengths had always been interpersonal. His weakness had been assuming he needed to understand everything instead of focusing on what he was actually good at. What about Marcus? Sarah asked. Strategic planning and investor relations. He has the financial background for it, and he's comfortable in those circles. And you? I do what I've been doing. Operations, problem solving, and making sure all the pieces work together. Tom leaned back in his chair. You know what's crazy? This might actually work better than the original succession plan. Why? Because it's based on what people can actually do instead of what they're supposed to do. The meeting was interrupted by a knock on my door. Derek walked in, looking nervous but determined. Sorry to interrupt, he said, but I was hoping we could talk. The management team exchanged glances. We can continue this later, Sarah suggested, gathering her papers. After they left, Derek sat down across from my desk. I owe you an apology, he said, for Saturday night, for not being there, for making this harder than it needed to be. You were processing. I get that. I was sulking, he corrected. There's a difference. We sat in silence for a moment. I've been thinking about what you said, Derek continued, about finding what I'm actually good at instead of trying to be good at everything. And I want to try. The client relations thing. If the offer still stands. It stands. But Derek, it means starting over. Learning your actual job instead of playing a role. I know. It means taking direction from people who used to report to you. I know that, too. And it means accepting that you're not the heir apparent anymore. You're just Derek, with a specific job and specific responsibilities. He was quiet for a long moment. Can I tell you something? He said finally. Of course. Relief. That's what I felt when Grandpa announced you were CEO. Not anger, not disappointment. Relief. That surprised me. Relief? For 3 years? I've been terrified of failing at a job I didn't understand. Terrified of disappointing people, of making wrong decisions, of proving that I wasn't worthy of the family legacy. He ran his hand through his hair. But you? You've never been afraid of any of that. You just focused on doing good work. I was afraid, I admitted. I just channeled it differently. How? I figured if I was going to fail, I wanted it to be because I wasn't capable, not because I wasn't prepared. So I spent 3 years making sure I was prepared for anything. Derek smiled. That's the difference between us. You prepared for success. I prepared for failure. It's not too late to change that. Is it really not too late? For us, I mean, as siblings. The question hit deeper than I'd expected. Derek, I never wanted to compete with you. I just wanted to be good at something. I know. And I turned it into a competition because I was insecure about not being as naturally good at this as you were. You're good at other things. Am I? Really? You got Mrs. Patterson to renew her contract when she was furious about the billing errors. You convinced the Morrison team to give us another chance after the quality problems. You've salvaged more client relationships than anyone else in this company. I never thought of that as a skill. That's because you were too busy thinking you needed to be me. Derek was quiet for several minutes, processing that. Can we try again? He asked finally. As colleagues this time, instead of competitors? I'd like that. Good. Because I have an idea about the Henderson account that I think you'll like. For the next hour, we talked business. Real business, not family politics or power struggles. Derek had genuine insights about client needs and market opportunities. I had operational solutions and implementation strategies. By the end of the conversation, I realized something important. We worked well together when we weren't trying to work against each other. Derek, I said as he prepared to leave. Yeah? Thanks for coming back. Thanks for letting me. After he left, I sat in my office thinking about how much had changed in just a few weeks. The company was running better than ever. My relationships with my brothers were improving. Even my parents seemed to be adjusting to the new reality. But there was still one more test coming. Tomorrow, the board of directors was meeting to formally approve the leadership transition. It would be the first time I'd have to defend my position to people who had the power to remove me from it. Everything I'd accomplished so far had been internal: family dynamics, employee relationships, operational improvements. Tomorrow would be about external validation, about proving that I could handle not just the job, but the politics that came with it. As I packed up my things for the day, I felt that familiar flutter of nervousness mixed with excitement. Some tests you can study for. Others you just have to trust that you're ready. Tomorrow, I'd find out which kind this was. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the company's main conference room. I arrived 30 minutes early to review my presentation materials and settle my nerves. The quarterly reports looked good on paper. Better than good. Actually, revenue was up, costs were down, employee satisfaction had improved across every department. But I knew the board's concerns wouldn't be about numbers. They'd be about confidence. About whether a 24-year-old woman could command respect from clients, competitors, and industry leaders. About whether my success so far was sustainable or just beginner's luck. You ready for this? Marcus asked, appearing in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. Define ready, I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. Ready enough to convince 12 successful business people that they should bet their investments on you. When you put it like that, it sounds terrifying. Marcus sat down across from me. Can I tell you something? Something I've never told anyone? Of course. I've been in dozens of board meetings over the past 2 years, sitting in the back, taking notes, watching how these conversations work. And I've never seen any of them ask Derek or me the kinds of detailed questions they're probably going to ask you today. That wasn't reassuring. They assumed we knew what we were doing because we were the heirs. But they're going to make you prove you know what you're doing because you're not what they expected. Thanks for the pep talk, I said dryly. Marcus laughed. That's not supposed to discourage you. That's supposed to remind you that you actually do know what you're doing. When they ask you detailed questions, you'll have detailed answers. Derek and I never would have. At 10 o'clock sharp, the board members filed into the conference room. 12 people who collectively controlled millions of dollars in investments and decades of business experience. Grandpa took his seat at the head of the table. But this was my show. Good morning, everyone, I began, standing at the front of the room with my presentation materials. Thank you for taking the time to formally review the leadership transition. I clicked to my first slide. 3 weeks ago, I became CEO of Montgomery Industries. Today, I'd like to show you what we've accomplished in that time and outline our strategy going forward. The next 20 minutes were the most intense of my professional life. I walked them through the quarterly improvements, the operational changes, the client satisfaction increases. I explained my vision for growth, my plans for expansion, my strategies for maintaining competitive advantage. But more than that, I answered questions. Detailed, specific, challenging questions about everything from supply chain management to regulatory compliance to market positioning. Ms. Montgomery, said Helen Crawford, Robert's wife and a board member in her own right, these results are impressive, but how do we know they're sustainable? Because they're based on systematic improvements, not quick fixes, I replied. We identified underlying problems and addressed root causes. The efficiency gains aren't temporary cost-cutting measures. They're structural improvements that will continue generating value. What about client relationships? Asked James Morrison. Many of our partners have worked with this family for decades. How do we maintain those connections under new leadership? By continuing to deliver excellent results and maintaining the personal relationships that matter. In fact, Derek will be transitioning into a client relations role specifically to preserve and strengthen those partnerships, while I focus on operations and strategy. And your brother Marcus? Strategic planning and investor relations. We're aligning roles with individual strengths, rather than trying to fit people into predetermined positions. The questions continued for another 30 minutes. Technical questions about manufacturing processes, strategic questions about market expansion, financial questions about budget allocation and profit margins. I answered every single one with specific examples and concrete data. Finally, Robert Crawford leaned back in his chair. Ms. Montgomery, I have to admit, when your grandfather first announced this transition, I had reservations. What kind of reservations? Age, experience, the optics of such a dramatic change in leadership. He paused, looking around the table. But frankly, you've just demonstrated a deeper understanding of this business than I've seen in previous presentations from this company. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, he said, but he was smiling. I have one more question. Go ahead. Where do you see Montgomery Industries in 5 years? It was the kind of question that could make or break the entire meeting. I took a breath and looked around the table at these 12 people who held my company's future in their hands. In 5 years, I see Montgomery Industries as the industry standard for operational excellence and client service. I see a company that's grown not just in revenue, but in reputation. A company that competitors study and clients recommend to others. I click to my final slide. But more than that, I see a company that people want to work for, where talent is developed, innovation is rewarded, and success is shared. Because sustainable growth isn't just about profit margins, it's about building something that attracts the best people and gives them reasons to stay. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Helen Crawford started clapping. Slowly, the rest of the board joined in. Well, said Robert Crawford, I think we've heard enough for now. The board members filed out to deliberate privately, leaving me alone with Grandpa and Marcus. How do you think it went? Marcus asked. I have no idea, I admitted. They could vote me out or give me a raise. Grandpa smiled. They're not going to vote you out. How do you know? Because I've been watching their faces for 40 years. And that was the look of people who've just been impressed despite themselves. 20 minutes later, the board returned. Robert Crawford stood up. Ms. Montgomery, the board has reached a unanimous decision. My heart stopped. We hereby formally approve your appointment as CEO of Montgomery Industries, effective immediately. The relief was overwhelming. Furthermore, he continued, we're authorizing a budget increase for the operational improvements you've outlined, and we'd like to schedule quarterly reviews to track progress. Thank you, I managed. All of you. Don't thank us, Helen Crawford said. Thank yourself. You've earned this. As the board members left, Grandpa approached me. How do you feel? He asked. Terrified and exhilarated, I said honestly. Good. That means you understand what you've taken on. Did you know they were going to approve it? I hoped they would. But you're the one who convinced them. He put his hand on my shoulder. Your parents are going to want to celebrate tonight. Your choice whether you're ready for that. I thought about it. Actually, I think I am. For the first time in weeks, I think I'm ready for whatever comes next. Even if what comes next is your mother planning another party. I laughed. Especially that. Because finally, after months of uncertainty and weeks of transition, I knew who I was and what I was capable of. And more importantly, so did everyone else. 6 months later, I stood in the same conference room where the board had approved my leadership, but everything was different. The quarterly reports showed record profits. Employee satisfaction scores had hit all-time highs. 3 major competitors had approached us about partnership opportunities. And the business magazine sitting on my desk featured Montgomery Industries as Company of the Year, how traditional leadership gave way to innovation. Derek knocked on my office door, holding a champagne bottle and grinning. "Time to celebrate," he announced. The Morrison renewal just came through. 3-year contract, 20% increase over previous terms. "That's fantastic," I said. And I meant it. "How did you manage that?" Turns out, when you actually listen to what clients need instead of trying to impress them with what you think they want, they're much more willing to commit long-term. Derek had transformed over the past 6 months. Once he stopped trying to be the CEO he thought he should be, and started being the relationship manager he actually was, his confidence had soared. Clients genuinely liked working with him because he focused on understanding their problems rather than promoting our solutions. "Any word from Marcus about the investor meeting?" I asked. "He's in there now, closing the deal on the expansion funding. Should be done within the hour." Marcus had found his footing too, working with investors and strategic partners on growth opportunities. His financial background and natural networking abilities made him perfect for managing the relationships that would fund our future expansion. As Derek left to deliver the good news to his team, I thought about how radically our family dynamics had changed. We weren't competing anymore. We were collaborating. Derek handled client relationships and business development with genuine enthusiasm. Marcus managed strategic planning and investor relations with confidence. And I ran operations while coordinating our efforts into something that actually worked. It turned out that when people do jobs they're actually good at, instead of jobs they think they're supposed to want, everyone performs better. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Dinner tonight? Your father wants to hear about the quarterly results." 6 months ago, that invitation would have filled me with dread. Tonight, it just made me smile. My parents had needed time to adjust to having a daughter who was also their boss. But they'd gotten there. Dad had started asking me genuine business questions instead of offering unsolicited advice. Mom had stopped trying to manage my image and started celebrating my actual accomplishments. The transformation hadn't been immediate or easy, but it had been real. At 7 o'clock, I found myself back at the family dining table, but this time the atmosphere was celebratory instead of tense. "So," Dad said, pouring wine for everyone, "tell us about this magazine article." I pulled out the magazine and read the headline aloud. "How Montgomery Industries Revolutionized Family Business by Abandoning Traditional Hierarchy." They interviewed employees, clients, even some competitors. I continued. Everyone talked about how the company culture changed when leadership started being based on competence instead of inheritance. "What did they say about Derek and Marcus?" Mom asked. "That we'd found a way to maximize individual strengths instead of forcing people into predetermined roles. Derek got a whole section about innovative client relationship strategies." Derek grinned. "I'm famous now." Marcus got coverage for the investor partnership that's funding our expansion into the West Coast market. "And you?" Dad asked. "They called me the accidental CEO who turned operational excellence into competitive advantage." "Accidental?" Mom frowned. "Because I didn't plan to become CEO. It just happened because I was doing the work that needed to be done." "That's not accidental," Dad said firmly. "That's strategic. You positioned yourself for success whether you meant to or not." The comment surprised me. 6 months ago, Dad would have focused on the challenges of my position. Tonight, he was celebrating the intelligence behind it. "There's something else," I said, pulling out an official-looking document. "The board approved the employee profit-sharing program I proposed." "What does that mean?" Derek asked. "It means everyone who contributed to our success this year gets a financial stake in the results. Margaret gets a bonus that reflects her 30 years of keeping this company running. The production supervisors get recognition for the efficiency improvements they implemented. The IT team gets rewarded for the system upgrades that saved us hundreds of thousands in potential security costs." "That's wonderful," Mom said. "Your grandfather would be proud. He already told me he is. We had lunch yesterday, and he said this profit-sharing program was exactly the kind of innovation he'd hoped to see from the next generation of leadership." Marcus raised his wine glass. "To Paige, for proving that the best leaders aren't the ones who want power, but the ones who want to use power well. To all of us," I corrected, "for figuring out how to work together instead of against each other." We drank to that. As dinner wound down, Dad pulled me aside. "You know," he said, "your mother and I have been talking." "About what?" "About how wrong we were. Not just about the CEO position, but about you in general." "Dad, let me finish. We spent so many years trying to protect you from challenges that we never gave you credit for being strong enough to handle them." He paused, looking out the window at the garden where I'd played as a child. "We thought leadership was about taking charge. You showed us it was about taking responsibility. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for proving it." As I drove home that night, I reflected on everything that had changed since that day 6 months ago when Grandpa announced I would be CEO. The company was more successful than ever. My relationship with my brothers had evolved from competition to collaboration. My parents had learned to see me as an adult instead of a child they needed to protect. But the biggest change was in how I saw myself. For years, I defined myself by what I wasn't. Not the ambitious one, not the natural leader, not the obvious choice. Now I defined myself by what I was. The person who noticed problems and fixed them. The person who built relationships based on trust instead of authority. The person who cared more about results than recognition. It turned out that was exactly what a leader looked like. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer in accounting. Saw the magazine article? So proud to work for a boss who actually knows what she's talking about. See you Monday. I smiled, thinking about Monday. About the meetings I'd run, the decisions I'd make, the problems I'd solve. For the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged. And everyone finally knew it. The girl who'd been invisible had become impossible to ignore. The family member who'd been underestimated had become irreplaceable. The employee who'd started by answering phones had ended up answering to no one but herself. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting better. And making everyone who underestimated you realize exactly what they almost missed. But here's the thing about proving people wrong. The real satisfaction doesn't come from their shock or regret. It comes from knowing that you were right about yourself all along. I was Paige Montgomery. I was 24 years old, and I was exactly who I was meant to be.